Avraham was a religious Jew. And as such, Avraham, by his prophecy, knew what the customs of the Jewish people was going to be in the future, and he actually conducted himself according to those customs wherever and whenever he could. In fact, the Gemara goes so far to say that Avraham also fulfilled rabbinic decrees. Now, if that's true, then if he fulfills even rabbinic decrees, why did he wait 99 years in order to circumcise himself? Circumcision is something we do for an 8-day-old child. And he knew this. He knew this by his divine insight. So why did he not fulfill the commandment of circumcision earlier? And we have many answers, but there are 3 general answers. Answer number 1, given by a great commentator, the Vilna Gaon, because Abraham wanted to be commanded by God in order to do the mitzvah. Every other mitzvah in the Torah, if you do so as practice, you can then fulfill the mitzvah in actual later, because you can repeat it. If you kept Shabbos last week, if this week you get the commandment from God to keep Shabbos, you weren't obligated last week, but you did it last week, you can still do the Shabbos completely this week. But if he had already circumcised himself last week, then this week when he gets the mitzvah, he won't be able to do it because God said so. Because he's already become circumcised before. And so he wanted to be a mitzvah, someone who was commanded and told what to do and then does it. Not doing it optionally and not being able to fulfill it later when God demands it of him. A second approach, which I heard from the great rabbi of Detroit, Rabbi Shmuel Irons, is that a covenant, a bris, circumcision is called a bris, a covenant. A covenant requires 2 parties. If I decide I'm going to do it for you, it's not a covenant. It's an act of love on my part, but not a covenant. And so Abraham had to wait until God commanded him, for only then did it have the significance of a covenant. A covenant is very, very powerful. For you see, when we make a treaty, you and I, we become bound together, irrespective of certain niceties. We overlook certain things because we are blood brothers. We've engaged in a covenant, and therefore we become connected, even if under normal circumstances we would not be friends. That's the power of the binding of a treaty. A treaty makes people unified even when ideologically, emotionally, socially they don't fit. Treaties can be broken, but the treaty with God is an eternal treaty. And therefore, Abraham was waiting until it was a covenant, till God told him to do so. And only then was he able to fulfill this mitzvah properly. Because it's not a bris, it's not a covenant, until there are 2 parties. Third approach is the approach of Hasidus, found in Torah Or by the Alter Rebbe, that the purpose of the bris is to assist the person in changing one's attitude and one's heart. The circumcision on the sexual organ indicates control of the passions of that part of the anatomy, that part of the persona. There are 2 types of circumcision. There's a circumcision that the person does, and then there's a circumcision that God does. As it says, you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart. That means a person should learn to control themselves and not indulge in things that are extraneous. But then it says, and God will circumcise the foreskin of your heart. God will circumcise your heart. Now, either you got to circumcise it or God got to circumcise it. How do you have the two together? The answer is, you can only go so far. You can't change the way you feel. You can only change the way you do things. When God circumcises the heart, when God does the circumcision, then there becomes a change not just in what you do, but in your whole attitude, in your whole feelings, in your whole soul. In every facet of your being, you become changed. That's why Abraham waited till God commanded him, because he wanted the circumcision to be total. He wanted to be transformed, that his whole being should be for a higher purpose. And here we have 3 stages of development of people. You have, number 1, the act. You do things. And then you have the change of the attitude. You become in a covenant with God. Number 3, then there is a change that is affected not just in your attitude, but in actuality, in your physical reality. In the world, things change because of that.